Welcome to the Gita in Action podcast. My name's Radha, and I'm here with our crew of seekers. We come together, we read the Bhagavad-gītā, we relish its ancient wisdom and its still relevance to our lives. And we try to grow together. We're a spiritual family that comes together to grow together and support each other and uplift each other. And it's working. It's working. We were just sharing right before we came live here how just these meetings just uplift us, are like the highlight of our weeks. And it's funny, my boss was asking me to go to a program at his house one night, and the programs are always so late over there. Like they go till like 11, which is like just killer for my sadhana. I like to wake up early and meditate and study, and so I rarely go because it just messes up my whole sadhana. And I feel a little bit bad because he's like always asking me, always asking me. And the other day he asked me for like my birthday because he was like looking at my astrology. And when he pulled up my astrology, he's he was like reading to me what it said, and he's like, spirituality just runs in your bones. He's like, if you're not hearing, you're not peaceful. And I was like, see, this is why I can't go to your programs. I have to wake up and meditate and have that time, that private time to myself for my studies. And he's like, I didn't have to look up your astrology to know that without studying, your mind is not peaceful. It's like, that's everybody. Without studying, your mind is not peaceful. Without this time that we come together and relish these ancient truths together and connect with God, our minds are not peaceful. Our minds are not peaceful. So this, whether we know it or not, but as we start to take the medicine, more and more we experience its effectiveness and we get very attached. And that's what this knowledge does for us. It's a healthy attachment, though. It's not like those attachments that pull us down and pull us in every which direction that we then regret later. It's a healthy attachment that we never regret because it only pulls you up higher and enables you to show up more loving and compassionately for yourself and others. So this is the medicine that we just want to keep taking, keep taking, keep taking. So today we are starting we're continuing in chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 13 and 14 is what we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, I just want to make a quick announcement. Our Guatemala Women's Retreat, we have about 5 spaces left. And the price is going to go up in a few weeks. The price goes up. Our early bird ends. So if you want to come on to Guatemala with us in November, the 7th through the 14th, please sign up soon. You can sign up on our website, consciouscollectivelife.org. And it's going to be ecstatic. It's going to be really ecstatic. Such a mix of adventure and kirtan and time for connection with yourself and others. You will leave transformed, guaranteed. So if you want to come to that, please sign up soon. Okay, let's get into our text, 13 and 14, chapter 12, 13 and 14. And before that, actually, let's say our prayers. Shraddhanjali, when you're ready, do you want to say our prayers for us?
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Panchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you. Okay, let's get right into it. Um, okay. 13:14 is where we are.
One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as we're moving through chapter 12, it's a pretty short chapter. I think it only has around 20 verses. And we're moving to the third section now of chapter 12. The first section we talked about how worship of Krishna's personal form is higher than worship of the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth. And then in the section we just wrapped up, Krishna compassionately meets us where we are and explains the various levels at which bhakti can be practiced. So he gives us that ladder of devotion. We talked about the ladder of devotion just coming lower and lower to meet us wherever we are, so that wherever we are, we can progress. So now we're coming up to the last section of chapter 20, and we're beginning with verse 13. And Krishna is shifting the discussion again. And so the question is no longer, what is bhakti or how do I practice bhakti? Krishna now begins answering a different question, and that is, what kind of person does bhakti gradually make us become? So what are the fruits of this practice? And so in this list that we just read, that Stella just read, it's not just a list of moral qualities. It's a picture of spiritual maturity. It shows us what happens when devotion begins transforming the heart. These qualities they're not something that's like, faked, or there's something that develops as a byproduct when bhakti rises in the heart. So it's a picture of a spiritualist. And one thing I want to address before we get into all of the different beautiful qualities is this last little bit here in this sentence when Krishna lists all these qualities and then he says, such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. And we shouldn't get confused here that this means that Krishna doesn't love everyone equally, because we know that he does. He tells us that through the Gita repeatedly. He protects all living beings, even sinful people. He loves. But love and reciprocation are not exactly the same thing. And this is the point we've come back to quite a bit. Krishna will reciprocate with you to the degree that we turn towards him. So if we're turning towards him, Krishna reciprocates with us more. And it's like, a mother loves her baby completely, but she doesn't necessarily, she's not going to like trust her baby with a kitchen knife. If a baby grabs a knife, actually, this happened to me yesterday. I was washing my baby's hands and she grabbed the knife on the side of the sink. And I like completely, immediately like reached for it, took it out of her hand because she doesn't yet have the capacity to understand how to use it properly, much more like the fine motor skills. But she doesn't understand, but as she grows up and matures and, is responsible, things may change. She wants to cook a nice meal for the family, then, then maybe that will be okay. So the love is here now. The love will be there then. but the depth of the relationship changes as her capacity changes. And so it's the same thing here. Krishna loves everyone, but he reciprocates according to how much a person is turning towards him. So that the more that we open our hearts, the more room we make for him in our lives. And then the more that we reciprocate with him, the deeper that the relationship becomes. Okay, so this is why Krishna says that these devotees are especially dear to him. It's not like these are his favorite most people. It means that these are the people that he'll reciprocate most with because they have that capacity and are ready for that. Their hearts are open. So another thing another thing to point out with this verse is a danger in spiritual thinking that we think, I'm a spiritualist, I'm practicing bhakti, I'm like, morally sound. I'm fine. I have nothing to work on because I'm already a spiritualist and I pretty much walk on water, right? We sometimes it's kind of people will slip into that. You're practicing a few high moral principles and you start thinking, I'm good to go. So Krishna warns us against that mentality. We can't just use bhakti as like a whitewash to cover our shortcomings. We have to understand the whole process of bhakti in itself is a cleansing process, and that we are all works in progress. Every one of us has attachments, has insecurities, has selfish tendencies, has fears, has blind spots. So it's not like you come into spiritual life and you're all of a sudden, holier than thou. No, the only difference is that through bhakti we're allowing Krishna to work on us. Doesn't mean that we're automatically cleansed. It's a process. But without the spiritual connection, the progress could take lifetimes, and there'll be lots of setbacks and regressions. But if we're consciously cooperating with Krishna, this transformation becomes accelerated. So coming into bhakti is wonderful, but it doesn't mean that you're completely cleansed. It means that you're a work in progress, but you've started, and you're allowing Krishna to work on your heart. You're allowing him to challenge your ego, to help reshape us. And what does this spiritual maturity actually look like? I heard once, I feel like my guru said this to somebody, but I don't want to put words in his mouth, but this concept that once we become spiritually mature, it's like we become childlike. Not childish, but childlike, meaning we have this like innocence of a child with the maturity of an adult. And this childlike innocence is so sweet. Like a child can walk into a room and instantly they soften even like the roughest person in the room. But as charming as they are, children are also kind of naive. They can be easily fooled. They make decisions without thinking through the consequences or even knowing the consequences because sometimes they just don't even know any better. And so this is what makes parenting a full-time job. It's like parents aren't just protecting children from the world, they're protecting them from themselves. Like yesterday when I had to take that knife out of my child's hands. But as children grow, they gain maturity. They become more responsible and more self-controlled. They learn that not everything revolves around getting what they want right now. At the same time, as they grow, many times adults start to lose their innocence. It's like life disappoints them, people hurt them, plans fall apart, and they become a little bit hardened. They become cynical, guarded, suspicious, manipulative. And it's like, wouldn't it be wonderful if someone could keep the innocence of childhood while gaining the maturity of adulthood? And this is a spiritualist, someone who's gentle without being gullible. They're wise without being cynical. They're childlike without being childish. This is a saintly person because their consciousness is no longer centered on the body or the ego. It's centered on the soul and on Krishna. And it's from that spiritual platform that they're able to bring together the best qualities of both childhood and adulthood. It's sweet. I think of this like as you get really kind of introspective around your spiritual life, hopefully you can start to see how maybe you've kind of started to loosen your grip on some things. Like I remember when I first came in and I was doing service in bhakti, I made the service completely about me. Like if it was successful, then I felt good. If it wasn't, then I felt like a failure. That ego trap. But as I go forward in my spiritual life, I understand, hey, this isn't actually about me at all. And it becomes lighter. Even if I'm taking on a lot more service, the service itself becomes lighter. I don't feel so held on tightly to it because I'm seeing it through my ego. I mean, there's still ego there, but much less than there was when I started. So in that, or maybe a little bit less, but even that little bit less, I can feel the difference, and that I can be a little bit more free, a little bit more, a little bit less taking life so seriously, a little bit more childlike. So this happens as we lose as the ego loses its grip on us. We become centered on God and our constitutional position as his as his servants and that relationship, and not so much on me, myself, and I, which is where we get hard because then everything is in relation to us. And of course, material energy is going to let us down. What do we expect? So it's designed that way. But if we're taking shelter in God, life becomes blissful, becomes sweet. There's nothing to make us cynical or hardened or guarded or suspicious. God's our best friend. So we get our innocence back. It's very sweet. Sometimes, this is another point that I think about often in bhakti. Sometimes we see people who are not spiritual, yet appear very kind and generous and moral. This I've also seen this in my life. Like when I left my job as working for the Navy, working for a contractor of the Navy, the people that I worked with were like just top-notch integrity. We were like a family. I really thought a lot of them. All of these things, the kind, generous, they had really high morality. And then, sometimes it's confusing because then you get into spiritual circles and you think these people aren't moral at all. They're not really living their highest lives. And this can be a little bit confusing. So I want to kind of clear this up a little bit, because this is something that helps me quite a bit. So this is true, that you may see other people who aren't spiritual who have really good qualities. And the reality is that good qualities can exist anywhere. So we're going to see, and this is, you might see some devotees that don't have good qualities. You may see non-devotees that have good qualities. The question is not whether good qualities can appear. The question is whether these good qualities have a stable foundation. Like how deep are the roots of these qualities? Like a house may look beautiful, but if the foundation is weak, it's only a matter of time before the whole house has some problems. So similarly, if our moral values aren't rooted in something very, very deep, if they're rooted in material energy, which we know is temporary, is always changing, changing social ideas, personal preferences, temporary identities or circumstances. When these things change, oftentimes those values will change too. So bhakti just provides a much deeper foundation because bhakti changes how we see ourselves. Instead of seeing ourselves as these isolated competitors trying to maximize our own happiness, we begin to understand who we actually are. And that's an eternal soul, a part of Krishna. And that every living being is also a part of Krishna. And from that understanding, compassion, humility, kindness, forgiveness, these things just become natural. So it's just a much deeper level of realization and therefore much more sustainable way of living as these qualities develop. And somebody may not be very far in their spiritual practice, and these qualities might not have developed very fully. But if God is their desire, if putting God at the center of their life is their sincere desire, it will happen. And when it happens, it will be very, very deeply rooted because it will be coming from this realization and not as a byproduct, as a temporary identity. Not because we're forcing them or trying to manifest them because it's who we think we want to be. But it happens because we're beginning to see reality more clearly. It's just a much deeper foundation. It's like it's foolproof. It's not like, oh, I'm a compassionate person when it's convenient for me, but when it's not, I'm not really anymore. Or I want to lift everybody up unless they're my competitor, and if they are, then I'm not really lifting that person up. No, it's holistic. This understanding, this compassion, this humility, this kindness, this forgiveness. So this is the difference. This is the difference between these qualities emulating from a spiritualist and versus somebody who's not. The roots are much deeper. Okay, let's get into these qualities. Is there anything that anybody wants to share before we get into the qualities? Is this resonating with you guys? Yeah.
I'll share quickly.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the childlike, um, spiritualists become childlike. I think there's a verse like that, there's something like that in Jesus's teachings too. And I remember like thinking about that a lot when I was younger and what that means. And it's always cool to hear it come back and like get a deeper understanding of it. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking like, yeah, children, they don't have any judgment. Like maybe a little bit of judgments there, but like for the most part, they just love everyone. Maybe sometimes they're a little shy, but they don't have, like you were saying, they don't have all this criticism, all this judgment, all this like negative feelings towards people that blocks them from just, almost naively loving everyone. Um, and yeah, that's such a beautiful thing. And to get back to that place, yeah, we just keep doing the practice and hopefully develop those qualities. But yeah, I just wanted to share that realization and thought. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah, it's so sweet, isn't it?
Shraddhanjali says, and they don't worry about money.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that's
But
for sure.
yeah, they just create. They don't worry about time either. They're just get
Mm.
in a zone. That childlike mind. May we all develop it to some degree. Thank you.
Mm. Yeah. I think every child we see at the playground, my baby goes over and tries to hold their hand. Could you imagine? Every person you see at the grocery store. You might get arrested for that. But it's very sweet. It's very sweet. Yeah, and concerns about money, that's definitely not there. A child is so wasteful. Um, yeah, I agree. That would be so sweet. Let's all make that a goal to return to that to some degree. And we see that in some of our great teachers. We see that quality. And it's very endearing. It's very endearing. Somebody with that childlike quality is just so lovable because they have that level of innocence. I think Radhanath Swami is like that. Sachinandana Swami has that in him too. It's a little, and I'm sure many others. Those are two that I happen to be close to, so I can easily see that. But yeah, thank you. So when we're looking at these qualities of this beautiful list that Shraddhanjali read off for us, one is the first here is freedom from envy. One who is not envious. And Krishna starts here because envy is one of the most common tendencies of a conditioned mind. It's so easy. Like someone gets the promotion we wanted, has the house that we wish we had, has the relationships or the recognition or the opportunities or success that we think would make us happy. And automatically the mind goes into why them? Why them? Why not me? Why do they have what I don't? So envy arises because we assume that someone else's gain somehow takes something away from us. This is our conditioned mind. But a spiritualist begins to see things differently. A spiritualist understands that possessions themselves do not create happiness. What matters is how those possessions are used. Someone can have enormous wealth and use it to destroy themselves. We've seen this time and time again. And then someone can have far less and use what they have in meaningful and uplifting ways. So bhakti teaches us that happiness doesn't come from what we possess. It comes from our connection with God and how we engage whatever we have in his service. And it's because of this understanding that envy gradually begins to lose its grip. Once we really understand where our happiness comes from. I was just talking to somebody at work last week and they were like, are you taking a vacation this summer? Do you take vacations? I was like, I'm just not super attracted to just like a random vacation. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but I get much more happiness from a spiritually centered vacation, either from, leading a retreat or like this weekend at Ratha Yatra, this devotional service. It's much more fulfilling to my heart. I've traveled quite a bit in my life. I spent a summer studying, or I spent a half a year studying abroad. I actually traveled quite a bit. And after a while, it just feels a little bit empty. It's like the next beautiful place, a beautiful place, and it's nice. But once service starts to really fill the heart, it becomes like nothing else can really fulfill it. It's like I don't want to work so hard so that I can make a lot of money so that I can have a bigger house because I know that bigger house isn't really going to do much for my heart or better car. If anything, I want to work less. I want to downsize so that life becomes more simple so that I have more time for service and study and genuine connection because I know that's what fills my heart. So as we start studying, as we start practicing, this realization will become bigger and bigger and clearer, and naturally we'll gravitate towards those things over time. It's a process. It doesn't have to be forced, and it doesn't have to be, everybody is at their own place, and that's perfect. But as that happens, our life just becomes simpler. This is what Prabhupada would say, high thinking or simple living, high thinking. It's not like a badge that we wear on our shirt. It's a realization that a simple living supports high thinking. Because if not, we're just entangled in the rat race. There's nothing high thinking about that. That's just like refined animal pleasure. We get to eat nicer foods, live in a bigger house. That's what's that doing for our consciousness? If anything, it's making us more competitive. It's making us more scared, because we're anxious of losing everything we have because we think it's what's making us happy. It's quite a mind trick. So anyway, this is the freedom from envy. This is the first one. The next one, seeing everyone as family, seeing everyone as our friends, going to the playground and holding hands with everybody. So this is what happens as envy diminishes, compassion naturally grows. Because a devotee begins seeing every living being as connected to the same Supreme Father. A devotee understands, a spiritualist understands, we are all members of the same spiritual family. It's like right now, sometimes we get kind of tunnel vision for just our family. I see this in my mom. I think my mom's on today. I see like somebody will do something like somebody who's not me will do something that's like not a very good decision. And my mom will be kind of hard on them. But then if I do that same thing, it's almost like she doesn't see it. It's like we have this special select vision for our family, and this is our family, and these people are good because they're my family. It's very limited. But once we become a spiritualist, our love becomes unlimited. We understand actually we're all part of the same spiritual family. When we identify with the soul, we see everyone as our brothers and sisters. When we identify with only the body, we see strangers, we see competitors, we see rivals, we see enemies. So this equal vision, this seeing everyone as our friend, it doesn't mean that we're going to agree with everyone. And it doesn't mean that everyone's going to behave properly, but it just changes the lens through which we see others. We begin recognizing the soul within. And this spiritual vision allows genuine friendship and compassion to arise. It really broadens our capacity to love. Because one of the challenges of spiritual life is that when we talk about loving everyone, it's like, yeah, it's easy to love people who are always kind, who are always wise, who are always patient, who are always inspiring. But the reality is, most of the people in our lives are not that ideal. And the reality is, neither are we. We all have a mixture of strengths and weaknesses, virtues and faults, good days and bad days. If we decide that we only love perfect people, we're going to be waiting for a pretty long time. In fact, if a community of only perfect people existed, most of us probably wouldn't even get to be a part of it. We probably wouldn't qualify to be a part of it. So we should see, the beautiful thing about Krishna is that he doesn't reserve his love only for ideal people. He loves people who are still growing, who are struggling, who are trying, people who are falling down and getting back up. Krishna says in the Gita that even if someone is sincerely devoted, even if they have imperfections, even if they fall, they should be considered saintly because they're rightly situated. Why? Because Krishna sees not only who they are today, but he sees who they're becoming. And this is a powerful lesson for us. When we learn to see people the way that Krishna sees them, we become more patient, more compassionate, more forgiving. Instead of asking, like, why aren't they further along? We begin asking, how can I encourage them on their journey? It doesn't mean that we become naive, it doesn't mean that we ignore their unhealthy behavior, but it means that we learn to love real people instead of demanding ideal people. And this is one of the beautiful qualities that Krishna is describing in these verses. And this is why sometimes, even learning like people's backstories, like what made people the way that they are, can really soften our hearts. Because we start to understand, this person is not their bad behavior. This person is just doing the best that they can with the tools that they've acquired in their lifetimes. And maybe they've been through some pretty bad stuff. And maybe they haven't developed the greatest tools. Like my husband loves Star Wars. I think of Darth Vader. He loves like Darth Vader's backstory. He like loves Darth Vader. And I think it's because he loves that he has this backstory And it just kind of opens and softens your heart. So we have to understand, that people are not their conditioning, that people come into this life with a bag, with karmic baggage. They live this life based off that karmic baggage, and we can't see them as the karmic bag that they carry. We have to see them as the spirit soul that they are. Even deeper than their backstory. We have to see them for the spirit soul that they are. That is pure, because that's a part of God. That's the full of compassion and love and brightness and childlike innocence. That's their spirit. That's their spirit soul. We have to see beneath that karmic package. That's what spiritual life is challenging us to do. That's the ultimate upgrade. And when we can do that, our love, our capacity to love just increases exponentially. It's beautiful. Sometimes we think, if I focus on my relationship with God, I have less love for everybody else because I may become a little bit more detached, and that's not true at all. It's actually the opposite, because we actually learn to love in a much deeper, unconditional way. This is a spiritualist. You may not be so entangled in the same way that you were before, in a way that maybe was a little bit unhealthy and led to some unhealthy dynamics. So the relationship dynamics may change a little bit, but the love itself, the quality of the love becomes much deeper. This was a huge help for me in my relationship with my dad when I came into spiritual life. I was always looking for something from my dad, always looking for his approval, always, and it was just never there. My dad had a lot of his own demons, and he just didn't have that capacity. And coming into spiritual life and learning, I can love my dad even if he's calling me, telling me horrible things, calling me horrible names, whatever, however he's treating me, I can still love him. It's quite beautiful. It's not codependency, because I'm not attached to what he's doing or what he's not doing and making it mean something about myself. There's a level of detachment there, but it's a much deeper love because it comes from a much deeper place. It doesn't come from our egos rubbing together in a set of unfulfilled expectations or fulfilled expectations. No, it comes from seeing every person as a spirit soul and relating to them in that way without expectation. And that is what makes the love unconditional and of the highest quality. That's real love. And not that I'm an expert at it, I'm not at all. I have a long ways to go, but just a little bit of progress we can feel, just a little bit of elevation we notice in our own lives. And that builds faith and becomes inspiration to keep diving into the ocean of love, because it will just get greater and greater. It's unlimited. And spiritual wealth changes everything. This is the next quality. Krishna describes a devotee as being free from possessiveness. So this doesn't mean that a devotee doesn't own anything. It means that a spiritualist understands what their greatest possession actually is. So it's like, imagine you're holding a $5 bill in one hand and $1,000 in the other. If you lose the $5 bill, you might be disappointed, but probably not devastated. Be like, oh, that's a bummer, but I'm just going to let that go. But imagine that all you have is $5. All you have is $5. Then suddenly every gain and every loss just feels enormous. So we know in spiritual life, material pleasures, possessions, positions, praise are like that $5 bill. Our relationship with Krishna is like the $1,000 in the other hand. So to the extent that our spiritual connection is weak, we become greatly disturbed by material gains and losses. It makes sense. That's where we're taking shelter. We have to take shelter somewhere. If we're not taking shelter if we're not taking shelter from God, then we're taking shelter from these material possessions and pleasures and positions. Of course, if we lose some of those things, it's going to feel huge. It's going to shake us. But as our relationship with God deepens and we start acquiring our spiritual bank account and it starts building, and suddenly we're up to $5,000. When that $5 bill turns into four, we're hardly even going to notice because our spiritual bank account, we got $5,000 over here. What's 75 cents over here? It's nothing. What 75 cents could be? Yeah, I lose my car. Okay. So as a relationship with God deepens, those same ups and downs lose much of their power over us because we know where our real wealth is. Or like, somebody criticizes us on the internet. That could absolutely shake us if all we have is this $5. But if we have 5,000 over here, again, that's like 25-cent knock. It's like nothing because we know where our real wealth is. So then Krishna says that a devotee is equal in happiness and distress. So this doesn't mean that we become numb. Again, it means that we develop perspective. Perspective. The pleasures and the pains of this world are temporary. The soul's relationship with God is eternal. And because the devotee is drawing nourishment from that deeper connection, we're less controlled by those externals. So this is why Krishna is saying that a devotee is satisfied. Not because everything's perfect, not because everything's going according to their plan, but because they've discovered something deeper than those circumstances. They've discovered relationship, they've discovered service, they've discovered connection. And they know those things are available regardless of what's happening externally. So, of course, developing these qualities, it's not always easy. There's a lot of times as spiritual practitioners, we fall into two traps. One is that we become very sentimental and we become like kind of a puppet of our emotions. If we're feeling inspired, then everything's wonderful. Then when the inspiration's gone, we doubt everything. So in both those situations, we're allowing our feelings to determine our faith. But we have to understand, feelings are like the weather. They're going to change. And bhakti requires something deeper than emotional highs and lows. Okay, we have to understand real spiritual growth happens through steady practice, showing up even when you don't want to, not just occasional inspiration. Occasional inspiration might help us kind of get things started. It may give us a little impetus, but we have to get to this place of steady practice. We have to understand the mind might feel close to God one day and distant the next. But we should know that Krishna hasn't moved. And therefore, our commitment shouldn't move either. So we have to kind of weather those storms. And eventually, we will feel very steady. But again, it's a process, and we can't expect these things overnight. And the other thing we have to be careful of is becoming judgmental. Say we get to this place where we have a very steady practice, we become very proud of our practice. We begin comparing. We look down on people who practice differently. Or criticizing people who aren't practicing at all. And the irony here is, I love this line, remember this line, is that while we think we're advancing spiritually, it's actually the opposite because we're not even thinking about God at this point. We're just thinking about ourselves, and how great we are. That's why we are looking down on others. That's not God-centered, that's ego-centered. That's the opposite of bhakti. So let that be a red flag for you, a warning light. A discernment is necessary. Judgment is not. Discernment is asking, how can I help this person from a place from a soft heart? Judgment is asking, how am I better than this person? So one is opening the heart, one is closing it. Oh wow, we're running out of time here, aren't we? So the point here is, I'll just do a couple more points. The point is these qualities, developing these qualities requires practice. It requires practice. We may see some of these qualities in advanced devotees and we think like, okay, but they're just really high and I'm not there. But we should understand that even they at one time were a beginner. Nobody wakes up one morning completely free from envy and ego, attachment, impatience, selfishness. These qualities are developed, they're practiced. People, they take struggle. Every saint has fought battles with their own mind. If not this life, then past lives. Every saint has fought battles with their own mind. Every advanced spiritual practitioner has worked through the gunk in their heart. They've learned lessons through mistakes, through setbacks, through sincere efforts. So we shouldn't be discouraged by the struggle. The struggle is part of the path. And in many ways, when we're struggling, the fact that we're struggling is evidence that Krishna is already working within us if we choose to see it like that. And this is how loving Krishna expands us. I one more example. I when I was at Rath Yatra this weekend, there was one night where we all made pizza together. And the different ladies were making pizzas, and I was taking care of Prema, so I wasn't cooking. But some ladies were more particular about like what they wanted on their pizza than others, and like so they would just like make their pizza and put it on their own plate, And then there was the countertop, and it was like a conglomerate of all the different pizzas. So when it was time to eat, I wasn't thinking anything of it. I just like took the first piece that I saw, was eating. And later the next day, one of my friends was like, "Oh, I was so hungry last night because you ate all my pizza." And I was like, what are you talking about? Everything was on the counter. I had no idea that was your pizza, And she's like, "No, that was my pizza." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." And my immediate, I was talking to him, I actually shared this with my boss because I was kind of like turned off. Like, this just makes me not even want to be around. It was like that was my gut reaction because I was like, why didn't you just put it on your own plate or like put a sign on it or something? Like it was just sitting up there with everything else. How was I supposed to? Like I immediately was just like frustrated. And my boss was telling me like, no, this is good. This was good because it will help you to develop sensitivity. It's not like about placing blame or it's about as spiritualists, we want to become more sensitive to other people. And my knee-jerk reaction, because I'm such a runner, is just like to run from this person. I'm just like, okay, I'm not gonna be entangled. So I felt this is entangling. But no, and actually we ended up having a nice conversation about it. I had a nice conversation with this person and it was very sweet. And we kind of, grew together in that. But that's the point, is that loving Krishna expands our love. It takes us out of our unconscious, knee-jerk reactions of the way that we'd handle things and show up. And it puts us in a place of like that what would Jesus do bracelet. That was like a thing. It puts us in a place of of purifying our love. We become more sensitive, we become more compassionate. Krishna describes the devotee as someone who's friendly and compassionate towards all living beings. So it expands the heart. We are not holding back our love based off of our hidden fears or, who's going to reciprocate in a way that we want them to. We are not loving cautiously. We're not loving conditionally. We learn to love freely because we've learned to direct our love towards Krishna. And in that, Krishna reciprocates perfectly. We don't have to be afraid. Krishna reciprocates perfectly. And because that relationship is spiritually nourishing, our heart becomes fuller rather than emptier. And then from that place, we give love to everybody else. Krishna's he's the source of all love. So the love we offer to him, it doesn't remain confined to him. It expands through him. And this is how we love everybody else. Not based off of if they made me feel bad because they blamed me for taking their pizza. Like our love comes from an overfilling cup. And that cup is full from connection with source. And then we're loving people through him, and our capacity to love increases so much greatly. It's like watering the root nourishes every leaf and branch of a tree. This is how we learn to love people. It becomes much bigger. So we become more loving because we're connected to the source of love itself. Okay, so just to wrap up here, Krishna's final point. These verses are not describing perfect people. They're describing what happens when imperfect people, like us, allow Krishna to transform their hearts. They become less envious, more compassionate, more steady, more humble, more loving. Not through self-improvement alone, but through sincere connection with Krishna. And Krishna says that such a devotee is very dear to him. So that's where we are today. That's all that I had for you. Do we have any shares or highlights before we end for the day? Let's see.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been just like 2 to 3 weeks that I have been associated with this group. And what I see is most of the things, whatever you told, resonated with the thoughts or what is going in my mind for the past 2 days. And it's just like that you are the Nimitta Matram who came here to just tell what has to happen, what is going to happen, and how it happens, right? How to really take it. So be it just like the childlike and being compassionate, all these things. So it actually happened with me, and I wanted to ask you with this. So I happened to meet my boss who is very arrogant, not that compassionate, all these things. Mostly these are the taglines which are given to the boss, right? So we were talking about this, and yesterday just we were talking about God and all these things. Then he told me one thing. I don't discriminate like you. I don't believe in all these things. But when I see this, right? So when we are so devoted, when we are trying to be so much good to people, we are compassionate, we are doing all service, we are showing all the love. It's not that we are showing just because we get something, right? So this comes out of us being devoted. This is the basic things that we do. We love everything around us, right? So what I see is good is happening to these people and not much good is happening with us. Why is that so? So this was what was really bothering me a lot because we are really devoted to Krishna. We believe in his actions, but those people who don't even believe, those people who are just leading their life haphazardly, they don't have any goal, they don't value others' feelings, they just see themselves first and all these things only good happens to them. It's not that when you said today, right, we should not envy others. I'm not envying here. It's just that these small things bother because when good is happening to them, why not for us? It's not that, oh, why should it only happen to him? He doesn't deserve. It's not that way. It's just like, why good is not happening to us, Mataji?
Yeah, it's an age-old question. I guess my first response would be maybe we need to recalibrate our definition of good. Because if a person doesn't have these qualities, if a person isn't compassionate, isn't steady, isn't humble, I would, I, I don't know that they could have a peaceful heart. To the degree that we don't have these qualities, our heart is not peaceful. So even if our external life looks quote unquote good, if we're putting other people down, there's nothing good about that. That doesn't come from a person that's full of love, whose heart is full of love And a heart full of love is ultimately a heart that's fulfilled and connected and peaceful. So I would one challenge, what is the definition of good? And sometimes we don't really understand. Like we get on Instagram, we see somebody with, a really hot body and nice house, and we think, oh, they have it all. But we know nothing about them. We see their external life, but we know nothing about their internal landscape. And that's where good really begins. So not for us to judge or not, but maybe just to understand that maybe you're just seeing part of the picture, and better than, even worrying about or trying to figure out that picture, just practice what you know and have faith in that process and pray for clarity. That would be my 2 cents around that. But I understand how in the meantime it can feel a little disheartening. Um, and I would sincerely pray for clarity around that.
Understood, Mataji. Is there a way we can make them feel that whatever you're doing brings so much of uh, what do you say? It does not make me feel happy. The way how you treat people or the way how you behave with people, because you are not compassionate, you don't have love. All that you have is hatred or you are envious. So, how to make these people understand and try to show them also the path to bhakti and eventually go back to Krishna in a right way and not just being disturbed soul and try to cause disturbance for others as well.
Yeah. The best we can do is treat them with compassion. Just like Jesus Christ was being crucified on the cross, he was praying for his perpetrators. That's the best we can do. To really invoke a real change of heart in a person, it has to be experienced. It can't be lectured. They can't be told what you're doing is hurting. A lot of times that doesn't really get us very far unless their heart is already very open to you. And if what you're saying, this is your boss, and that may not be the case. So it maybe just being that example with detachment. You're not being that example so that they realize and they change. You're being that example because in service to God, in service to God's child. And you're loving them through that. And if they feel that love, that's the best chance of their heart changing. But we can't do it for that either because we're not God. We're doing it in service to God. We have to understand that. But I would challenge you, and that would be beautiful for your spiritual practice. When you're being treated in a way that you think is garbage, respond with love and compassion. And do it over and over and over again in service to God. Not trying to control the situation, not trying to be a doormat, but do it in service to God. And pray for clarity. And come back and tell me how that works for you. But you got to give it time too. You have to give it some time. Yeah, we have to have perseverance. It's so important in our spiritual life. But you'll see it. You'll see some shift. If not in him, then in you. And that shift that happens in you, you won't even need the answers to these questions because you'll
Yeah.
have them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the clarity.
Yeah. Thank you. Good, sincere question. KDG.
Hi, Bo. My
Hi,
my
Paul.
my share is similar, so I really feel the last share. Um, my sister is back from Oregon, and as you guys know, it's a challenging situation. Um, yeah, and like last night, there was kind of like her and my husband had this like fight, and it's kind of these same ideas of like, this is a person who just doesn't have to work, has endless funding from a ex-boyfriend. Um, and I try not to have like, I mean, honestly, jealous feelings about it or just like, what the heck, it's unfair. But when I speak about it, I can hear it in my own voice that I'm like, this is ridiculous, But I've also realized how completely unhappy she is and how like grateful I am to have um uh routine and things I have to do, and challenges and things to balance and remember my spiritual practice, and and how blessed I am to have like bhakti in my life. And I used to think about it with my old bosses who are gazillionaires. Like, I wouldn't trade it in a million years. I wouldn't trade to have their lives or their money, And yeah, and I think it's just helpful because, like, we need to work on, like you're saying, this great advice of like meeting it with compassion, and the perspective is a big one for me. That's so helpful. But also with some boundaries to not be a doormat and not let things just repeat forever. So like last night and I mean, to be completely honest, it's kind of gross, but like she's not very cleanly. And like with the pregnancy, like I've asked her before, like, wash your hands after the bathroom, and she doesn't respect me at all. So like she just, I guess, didn't care and forgot or whatever. But so my husband brought it up yesterday and she got mad and called him some expletives. But by that point, she was already out of the front door. So I shut the door because like I needed boundaries of like, it's not good to have fighting around me right now. So, and I didn't slam it, but I didn't shut it softly. So, I regret that a little bit, but also I'm like sending it's a communication. Like this is not acceptable, like I'm cutting this conversation off. Yeah. And then anyway, and then the other thing that was coming to my mind a lot, in the last half hour is like, this was kind of stuck in my mind, like last night and this morning. And I'm like, hey, I know this is my mind. This is just my mind. Like, it's only a little piece. And that's so helpful that we have this knowledge and this perspective that, like, I used to be so overcome with my mind years ago, and it really felt like everything and the whole thing. So that was another big one coming to my mind. So, so thank you all for your shares and stuff too.
Yeah, so nice. Thank you, Katie. Situations are hard.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Chantal.
Situations really are hard. And forgive me, I didn't catch his name, but the gentleman that spoke before Katie, I kind of want to piggyback off of something he was saying. Because this week has been hard for me. My kids are in summer camp, 2 summer camps, actually. One, my oldest is volunteering. My youngest got a scholarship to go. The second one is a free summer camp. But with the summer camps and having to pack kids' lunches, which means a little more food used through the week and gas used through the week. And we had just gotten married, and there's a lot of things going on. And financial situation is not good at all right now. And I've found myself a couple times this week being very anxious, being very curious as to why life has to be like this for myself right now. So he had said something. It's not a matter of why isn't my life as good as them? How come it's just not good right now? Right. So I found myself playing with that a little bit this week of it's very stressful. How come after everything I've done, after, I'm teaching, I'm working, I'm doing, why do I find myself in this position right now? And then it always comes back to my mind. It was a line that Ram Dass said, suffering is grace. Just because it's not good as far as we define it right now, hindsight is 2020. And I've had to find myself saying, I'm going to give it to Krishna. I'm going to give it to Krishna. I'm going to give it to God. Everything is exactly as it is. And there's a reason why I'm walking through fire right now. And maybe it's to humble myself. Maybe it's to remind me to be better at budgeting and keeping bills together. Maybe it's a reminder that sometimes life is not always rainbows and butterfly, and to build resilience. I don't know. it kind of popped up into my mind. And Katie and the gentleman that spoke before, they both said things that kind of triggered that. And I have to remind myself, suffering is grace. There's always a reason. But not to envy others for what they have, or not to envy what I used to have, or cling or attach to a better financial situation 3 weeks ago, or hope and grasp for a better, smoother schedule next week after summer camps and backs and forths, right? I'm trying to remind myself to just live in the moment and give it all, just like last week, right? Give everything I'm doing to Krishna. That's my reflection for today.
Wow. Really deep and beautiful. Thank you, Chantal. Yeah, ultimately, everything in this life is meant to turn us back to Krishna. Everything that we go through, every circumstance, this life is like a hospital, and we're sick because we're spiritually disconnected. And it's intended to heal us, and it teaches us through experience, through experiences, through mistakes, through great teachers that walk in. And to the degree that we're looking to get better, we will get better. If we're looking to, lay in that hospital bed helpless, that may happen to us too. But everybody that's on this call, that's listening to this now, this is the commitment we've made together. We're committed to getting better. And this is the treatment, this wisdom, this practice. And you may feel like you're getting tested. Your hospital bed may get pretty uncomfortable. You may not bring your meals on time, but don't let that distract you from taking the medicine, from the healing that needs to happen. Let that only inspire you to overcome, because that's what's available for us if we do. So that's all the time that we have today. Thank you all for coming and for sharing so sincerely. And this was nourishing. I am grateful for you all. And I'll see you all on Monday. Today's Thursday. Yeah. See you all on Monday. Thank you all.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.